Hi everyone, this is Jim with Round 11 coverage of the 2014 U.S. Chess Championship taking place in St. Louis, Missouri. Today is the final round of the round robin portion and will be the final result of the tournament if there's a clear winner, and if not, there will be a playoff on Tuesday. So the game I want to look at today is Kamsky versus Josh Friedel. Kamsky with the white pieces and Josh with the black pieces. Yesterday when I was talking about it, I said that both Josh and Sam Shankland had a chance to make it to the top of the tournament if both Linderman and Akobian lost. But as it turns out, Linderman and Akobian played each other in the final round, and so it's not possible for both of them to lose. So Shankland and Friedel are out of it in terms of making it to the winner's circle, although, of course, they've had a very good tournament. But Gata Kamsky, being only half a point behind the two leaders, still has a chance to win the tournament overall. He just needs to win this game and to have the game between Linderman and Akobian end in a draw, and then he will be into the playoffs. So Gata certainly is striving for this. He's a many-time, I think 4-time winner of the U.S. Championship, and he'd like to add another point to that total. So here he is with the white pieces, and of course the draw won't do anything for him because at least one of, Linderman and Akobian will at worst end in a draw, and so they will be still a half point ahead of him. Or if one wins, then he's out of it. But he needs win in any case to just be in contention. So what opening does Kamsky choose in a must-win situation like this, last round of the tournament? Well, let's take a look at it. D4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, and bishop f4. Yes, he's going to play his trusty London system, c5, e3. And there we have it, the pawns forming a nice wall here, the bishop outside the pawn chain and looking out on this nice diagonal. And just a very solid setup. Long thought to be not too advantageous for white. The most aggressive tries usually involve the moves d4 and c4 in the queen-pawn openings, but it's an opening that Gata has played all his life, and he's very comfortable with it, and he plays it for a win. So let's see how he does it. Now Josh here with the black pieces selects a bit of an unusual line. The most common move here is d5. Another idea here is queen b6, or just developing the knight with knight to c6. But Josh decides to take. It's also a known move, but not the most common one, but not a bad move. So white takes back, and then b6. So he wants to get the bishop on the light squared diagonal and put some counter pressure. And here Kamsky plays the move h3, providing a retreat square for the bishop. And we're actually out of my opening book at this point, so I doubt this is truly a novelty, but not the most common position in top-level chess, I can say that for sure. So black continues with bishop b7, and we get a number of normal developing moves here. I think there's not a whole lot going on. Just the pieces are going to the natural squares, the king's castle, rook to e1. But one thing to note about this is that this way of playing without bringing the pieces immediately into direct opposition with each other, well, there is one capture in the position, but in general this capture is not good for black, so he's not looking to trade this good bishop for this knight, which is not yet doing anything. So what I'm saying is that this kind of opening keeps a lot of force on the board, leading to a longer game and maybe more chances to win, more opportunities for the other player to make a mistake. Josh plays d6, and now Kamsky launches out with the unusual move a4. So maybe he's hoping to provoke some weaknesses on the queen side with a further push to a5. Josh plays a6, presumably so he can meet a5 with the push b5. And now he's got a really solid setup here with these pawns all on the third rank, and his pieces comfortably behind him. There's going to be a square for every piece, so black's position is slightly cramped, but he's got room for his pieces, and that's enough. I think this is known as the hedgehog setup, where you get a bunch of pawns here on the third row like that. So knight bd2 is played here, and knight bd7. So yeah, a square for every piece, but just barely. He's pretty much filling the second row up with his pieces. And now bishop to h2, a bit of an unusual move. But it's not clear if the bishop really needed to stay on f4. Gata wants to continue to exert pressure on this diagonal with his bishop, so he's not thinking of moving it this way. And it may be a bit of a target on f4, so it just retreats to a square where it's safe. And the game continues, rook e8, a5. And here's that push I was talking about, trying to maybe disrupt black's placement of the pawns on the queen side. The most natural move here is b5, which was not played. I just wanted to take a look at this. The engine says c4 could be played then, and further disrupting the pawn structure over here. Something like d takes c4, knight takes c4. Not that this is a horrible position, but I think Josh looked at this and decided he didn't like it, and so he played the second choice of the engine, which is to play d5, which would stop white's d-pawn from advancing further, but it comes at a cost. For one thing, it opened up this diagonal, so this bishop has a complete view of the board, pretty much, and it also blocked in his own bishop. So the structure may be more solid here now than it was in the other line, but at the same time, there's a price to be paid. So Gata continues with c3, bishop c6 was played. This bishop is closed in on this diagonal. Maybe it can reposition itself and do something on a different diagonal. Maybe even going to b5 and trading itself for the bishop on d3, perhaps. So a takes b6 was played, queen takes b6. And now it's a case where there's kind of offsetting weaknesses. There's this weak pawn over here on the a file that black has, but there's this weak pawn that white has on the b file. The chess engine here prefers white by a fair amount, but it's not necessarily easy to come up with a plan in this position. So let's see what Gata does. This pawn is immediately under fire, and he plays the somewhat peculiar looking move rook a2, just defending with the rook. And I guess it's not so easy to chase this rook away, so it can sit here comfortably. If a bishop or a queen were to get to this square, it would put some pressure, but that square is currently guarded by both the queen and the knight, so it looks like that's not happening anytime soon. But black can bring more pressure against the the b pawn. But first, black plays the move bishop to b5. Yeah, so completing the journey of this bishop, which was hidden behind the pawn wall. It's now moved itself to a position where it's actually doing something. And Gata decides to keep his bishop. He drops it back to c2. So we still have all the major pieces on the board. The only thing that's been traded so far are two pawns. Rook e to c8 was played. Putting some more pressure on the queen side pawns, maybe discouraging the move b3, because that would leave c3 loose, and knight to e5. Okay, good central location. And here, finally, at move 18, we get the first exchange of pieces. Knight takes and bishop takes. So that knight was just too strong on the e5 square, and black felt compelled to take it off. So now knight d7, chasing the bishop away, and the bishop drops back to f4, which sort of makes you wonder why it was on h2 in the first place, but back to f4 it goes. a5 is played here by black. You may have the idea of using this a pawn to restrain the b pawn, keep it from advancing to b4. So rook e3 was played, activating the rook, and now with ideas of a kingside attack. This rook could come over, put some pressure on the king side. The queen can jump in pretty quickly. The two bishops are already looking somewhat in the direction of the king side, and the knight is just a couple hops away. So the potential is definitely there for a king side attack, and Josh takes immediate defensive action with knight to f8, just adding to the defense of these squares. And of course, bringing to mind the famous saying of Bent Larsen, with a knight on f8, there is no mate. So let's see if that's true in this case. Queen to g4 was played, so just continuing with this theme of the kingside attack. Bishop to d7. So the bishop deciding that it can't make a useful trade over here on b4, and it's not doing that much looking on an empty diagonal, comes back to maybe shore up some of the kingside pawns. When this pawn is supported, it may enable the idea of an f-pawn push. When you support the e-pawn here, and the f-pawn can go forward and leave off the defense of the f-pawn. So this has the idea of shoring up the kingside. Bishop to e5. Now the knight is no longer on that square, and the bishop is blocking the square that the knight would come to. But the knight can come to g6 here, hitting the bishop. And then queen to h5. So it makes you wonder in this position, is it too dangerous? Yeah, it's too dangerous to take. Well, let's see what would actually happen. If he takes here, the problem is he's opening up this line for the bishop, and it's a mate in two. Okay, that's right. So the bishop is still immune. The knight is only apparently attacking it. So rook to f8 was played, bringing more pieces back towards the king. And knight to f3, so bringing another piece also towards black's king. And finally bishop to e8, so about as tight and compact a formation around the king as you could get. Everybody huddled in and trying to shore up the king's side, leaving only the queen and the rook over here. So black has sort of given up all hope of queenside counterplay for the moment, but at the same time he's set up a very solid defense, and there does not appear to be any great way to break through. Now at this point, yeah, this bishop is still not threatened, because after knight takes, queen takes, there is checkmate. But Gata drops this bishop back to h2 anyway. Maybe he wants to free up the square for the knight, so that's possibly an idea. And black plays the move f5, or maybe he was worried about the move f6, just chasing the bishop away. Anyway, f5 was played, which is a good defensive move in this case. It shuts down the bishop on this diagonal, and this pawn is only defended by the queen, but it's not under attack, so this pawn is a bit loose at the moment. The knight goes to d2. I'm not quite sure what this is about. Maybe he's thinking of getting it out of the way of the f-pawn and pushing some pawns himself, maybe f3 and g4. Hard to say. Rook to f6, and now rook to e1 was played. So so now white's pieces all of a sudden are going backwards. It seems that Gata has looked at the situation, decided that the kingside attack is not gaining a whole lot, and he needs to regroup his forces before making some progress. So black here pushes on with the move f4, and this is a bit of a strange move. And of course, one thing to remember is they're on move 28, so the time control is at move 40, so they've got 12 moves before the time control, and they were both a bit low on time. They'd spent a lot of time, Gata in his case, calculating the attack, and Josh in his case searching for the defense. It seems to have found the defense, but now you're left in the situation where you have a few minutes to make 12 moves, and so it gets a little tight, and so sometimes the most accurate moves are no longer played. So f4 is an active move, but it creates some weaknesses. Whenever your pawn moves forward, it leaves weaknesses behind it, and in fact a square that used to be guarded that is not guarded anymore is g4, and Gata's queen goes to g4. Still, nothing is collapsing immediately, and perhaps black is looking for counterplay with the push f3 at the right moment, disrupting white's king side. You know, if he can get his bishop out of the way and get his rook over here, it's possible that black could get some real queenside pressure. So let's see how it goes. But I have to admit that the chess engine thinks this move is not justified, this f4 move. So bit of a mistake there. Queen g4, bishop to d6 was played. Okay, just putting defending the pawn, but it was adequately defended, but setting up a battery against the bishop on h2. You'll see this in a minute. Knight to f3, blockading the pawn so it can't move forward, and queen to c7. So now we have this battery I was talking about. So when this knight wanders away, this move f4 to f3 may come with tempo of an attack on the bishop. After queen c7, the king goes to h1. So if there is a bishop takes h2, it won't be with check at least. Bishop to f7 was played, shoring up the e pawn, which is now weak since the f pawn has left it behind. Knight to g5. Okay, pressure on the bishop and on the pawn. Now knight to f8 is played. Once again, going back to that defensive position, but defending these key points. And knight takes f7. So Gata is giving up a piece. He's trading a piece, but he's getting the bishop pair. And so I think with this trade, a lot of his kingside attack potential goes away. But in a sense, he'd sort of given up on that already, and he was trying to maneuver his pieces and reconfigure them. And here he saw an opportunity just to grab the bishop pair and effectively have a material advantage, because the bishop pair is worth maybe half a pawn in the long run. Of course, it's still a ways from the endgame, and you really need the position to open up before the bishop pair has its full effect. So it all depends on how the course of the game goes, but Gata's sort of cashing in to a certain degree. He's getting rid of this attacking knight, but grabbing the bishop pair. So king takes f7 was played. And now queen to f3, using the queen to blockade this pawn, which the queen can't be chased away except by the knight, and the knight's got no easy task to get to any of these squares which could actually chase the queen away. So it's actually pretty secure sitting here. Rook to b8 was played, putting pressure on the b pawn. Bishop to g1. So now that this diagonal seems pretty securely locked up, maybe the bishop will have more use on a different diagonal. King to g8 was played, just getting the king back out of its somewhat exposed position. Bishop to d1. And remember, all these moves are being played in time pressure. So we're on move 36 now, just a few moves more to go. Queen to c4, attacking the rook. And rook goes to a4, attacking the queen. The queen drops back to c7, and now there's a repetition. So I think the purpose of that repetition, neither side really wants a draw. After queen c4, Gata finally plays b3 to avoid the repetition. But one thing that repetition did was it got both sides closer to the time control. So queen c7, back, queen to d3, getting out of the way of the f-pawn. So now this pawn can come forward, but maybe the queen is in a better position over here, and rook to c8 was played. So this is move 40, and both players breathe a sigh of relief. They made the time control. There's still a slight edge for white in this position, but he has weaknesses too. Black is going after these weak pawns here. The a pawn seems to be doing a good job of restraining the queen side pawn. So, and then this f pawn is well defended at the moment, but in the long run may be a weakness. So that's the way things stand, and immediately the c pawn is under attack. So rook c2 is played. Queen to b7 now, hitting the b pawn, and c4. A nice move, because this allows the defense of the c pawn from the queen. If you back up a second, there was no good way to defend this pawn. He's not looking for a repetition at this point. If he just moves the rook away, undefending the c pawn, the queen can just go back to c7. So he's got to find another way to defend it. And so c4 defends the b pawn by allowing that view of the queen. So here the queen goes to b4, did open up a hole here for the queen, and hitting the rook on e8. So the rook e1, the rook goes to f1. And now there's a trade. D takes, b takes, and queen to e4 was played here. I'm sorry, yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. After the exchange, rook to d8. Okay, putting the rook opposite the queen, often a good idea in openings and even later in the game. Although here you have to be careful, the rook is actually loose on d1. It's not defended there. The bishop drops back to e7 or to c7, defending the rook. Then that would be it would be safe then. But it is a bit loose right now. Okay, so now queen to e4, just getting away from the rook, and maybe with some ideas of penetrating. If the pieces on black's camp get misplaced somewhat. Perhaps the queen can penetrate on some of these squares. In fact, this square is unguarded right now, so have to be careful about these things. But black is ignoring it for the moment and pushing on with a4. So, well, this is true. We've got two passed pawns. There's a rook behind this passed pawn, and this passed pawn is closer, but it doesn't have a rook behind it. So Josh has broken one of the rules of always put your rooks behind your passed pawns. But he's following another rule, which is passed pawns must be pushed. So we'll see which of these old sayings turns out to be true. So bishop to g4 was played here. Guess the bishop on the back rank was no longer doing much useful, so it gets out here and hits the weak e pawn, which is adequately defended for now. So black continues on with a3, trying to make this a dangerous threat, just 2 steps away from queening. And now c5 was played. And right here is probably the critical blunder of the game. Up until this point, it's been within the range of even to slight edge for white, sometimes a little bit more than slight, but still with significant drawing chances for black. So never was he lost in the position. But this move he plays now, a2, is a mistake. And first of all, well, let's look at the line he probably was calculating. If white takes right away, then black has the nice move, bishop takes c5, because this pawn, the queen on e4 is unprotected, so this pawn is pinned. So he's trading his isolated pawn for his passed pawn for white's passed pawn, and I'm sure that's what he intended with this operation. But even though this pawn appears to be threatening to queen, that square is guarded, so it's not an immediate threat. So white is not forced to take that pawn. He can just leave it there and play the move f3, which defends the queen. And now this bishop is under attack, and so this is serious trouble. The bishop just has to move. Let's see, the engine gives the line queen b1, giving up the piece, basically. Let's see, after queen b1, can you just take that bishop? Or the pawn. Yeah, you can just take the bishop. And h5, hitting white's bishop. And queen to b5. Okay, so that's the computer line, but white has won a pawn and a piece, so looks pretty good for white to me. And that was best play for black. What actually got played in the game, let's back up. After a2, I'm going in the reverse order. After a2, f3, the bishop is under attack, and the natural move bishop to b8 was played. So that other line, which was somewhat tactical, still is an advantage for white, a winning advantage, but here it's even quicker. Okay, so the pawn can just be taken now. There's no tactic of bishop takes on c5. And then the queen goes to c4. It's a double attack, hitting this rook and that rook. So, but it can just drop back. The rook drops back to defend. So Skanes doesn't gain anything for black, and it's pretty much game over because of the power of this protected passed pawn. And also, white still has the advantage of the bishop here. So as long as the king is safe and there's no tactic winning the bishop, if this move h5 could be played, might trap the bishop. I guess you'd need to play g6 and then h5. But doesn't ever materialize. Black plays the move rook f7. And white goes rook f to e1. Okay, getting the rook on an active square, putting more pressure on the e pawn. Rook to e7, defending. Bishop to f2, getting the bishop into a more active spot. Rook to e8, cancel that. Rook e to e8 was played, and h4. So very calm moves, no need to push this pawn too fast. You saw what can happen when you push a pawn too quickly. You can just lose it. So he's just, Gata's getting everything just set up the way he likes it before his final push, and he's just putting a lot of pressure on black's position. So rook to e7 was played. It looks like black is having trouble finding a constructive plan, but the engine all along is just saying white's just winning here. So h5, rook e to e8. Yeah, so black is sort of marking time, waiting for the final blow. Now rook a to b1. This has some nice squares on the b file to potentially come down to attack black's camp from the side. Rook to d7 was played, so guarding the b7 square. King to g1, getting the king to a slightly safer square off the h file. Queen to a2, hitting the bishop, but the king has got it defended. And now c6. So you see, Gata was really patient. He just took his time getting his pieces set up exactly the way he wanted. He made some threatening moves to force black's pieces into awkward positions, and then at the right moment he pushes his pawn forward. So rook d to e7 was played here. And now rook to a1, chasing the queen. Queen goes to d2. Rook e to c1, getting the rook behind the passed pawn. Like I said, if black had remembered to put his rook behind his passed pawn, this might not have happened. And rook to a7 was played, maybe trying to get an exchange going. Of course, this rook would be loose, so rook takes a7 is not possible. But just d5, going after this pawn. And of course, you really need to take something here, because this, if you have a pair of protected passed pawns, that's even more dangerous. But black throws in rook takes a1, rook takes a1, and bishop to d6, blockading the passed pawns. And now d takes e6, so white decides to take. Queen to c3, hitting the loose rook. Rook goes to d1, hitting the bishop. Bishop goes to c5, and now queen takes f4 was played. And at this point, black resigns. It's pretty hopeless. He's 3 pawns down. White still has the bishop pair, and he's got 2 passed pawns. This one is this one is going to get traded off. I suppose the game might continue. Knight takes, bishop takes, rook takes. He can't take with the rook because there's a mate in 3. This is a neat trick too. Check. The king has nowhere to run, so all that's possible is throwing material into the way, and that's checkmate. So it's really not defensible anymore after that variation. So after the move, queen takes f4, Josh resigned. So Gata won this must-win game using his favorite London system. And the other game at the top of the boards, Linderman versus Akobian, did end in a draw. So now there's a 3-way tie at the top. After 11 rounds, there's 3 players with 7 points, Linderman, Akobian, and Kamsky. And on Tuesday, they will have a playoff, an Armageddon game, and a playoff and another Armageddon game. So should be exciting. If you want to watch it live, they're going to be broadcasting from St. Louis at, let's see, it's 1 p.m. their time. It's 11 a.m. in West Coast time, U.S. West Coast time, or 2 p.m. U.S. East Coast time. Makes for some exciting chess. Those quick time controls can make it more interesting to watch. And at the same time, a very similar scenario played out in the Women's Championship. They had their final round today. In their case, it was round 9. Both Anna Zatonsky and Irina Krush, who are not playing each other but playing different opponents, they both drew their games. And Tatev Abrahamyan, who was half a point behind, won her game and against Kamila Baginskite. And so there's a 3-way tie in the Women's Championship too. So there will also be a playoff tomorrow, or Tuesday, a playoff Tuesday in the Women's Championship as well as the Men's Championship. So look for some exciting chess ahead. I will bring you an update after all the dust has settled. So see you guys later. Leave any comments you have in the section below. Bye.